I froze in the doorway as the chandelier breathed overhead, my lungs stalling when I saw the chairman wearing my scarf, the same cashmere I had wrapped around a shivering stranger less than an hour earlier. He lifted steady blue eyes. "Welcome, Sergeant Reed," he said. "Shall we begin?" People ask for that moment, the tilt, the click, the world snapping into place. But stories like mine start where pride goes quiet in the back row at the VA with burnt coffee and a blinking number that never seems to move. I'm Alyssa Reed, 35, Marine Corps Veteran Supply Sergeant, honorable discharge, honorable limp when the weather turns. I came home to small-town Pennsylvania because familiar roads seemed like softer ground. They weren't. Real American life is bills that arrive on time when paychecks don't, a heater that coughs before it warms, and gas measured by quarters of a tank. The Ford sputters. On Sundays, I stock shelves at the church pantry near the shuttered mill. What wears you down isn't only money, it's being looked through. Hand someone a resume and watch their eyes slide to the scar at your knee like a dent in a used truck. The week this began, I had $12 and one last interview circled in my notebook. Hartley Defense Systems, a glass and steel fortress on a hill. Their website said they valued service. Hope is stubborn. I circled the date in ink. That morning, I ironed my best blouse, brushed my boots, and packed a turkey and Swiss in wax paper. I looped my old Marine scarf around my neck, scarlet piping soft wool, the smell of winter and tents. The recruiter gave me a 5 o'clock slot, the kind that makes a person feel like an afterthought. Still, Marines keep time. I planned to be early. The commuter train clattered past brick storefronts and steeples. A kid tossed a football to his dad in a narrow yard. I felt that familiar ache that isn't pain, the ache of leaving a unit and coming home to silence. At the little station, the sky had a polished steel look that means cold. Hartley's campus glinted a mile away. I could have called a cab. I walked to steady my breathing. The sidewalk curved past a pocket park. A maple shed its last leaves over a bench. He sat there, thin, coat-scuffed shoes, hands shaking like typewriter keys. His face was years and wind. His eyes were bright and courteous. He didn't ask me for anything. He met my gaze and nodded. In my head, professionalism, punctuality, polish. And older than that, my grandmother. The measure of a person is what they do for someone who can't pay them back. I sat. "Cold evening," I said. "Colder if you're waiting on luck," he answered. Before I could second-guess myself, I placed the wax paper bundle in his hands. "It's warm," I said. He weighed it like a gift, and then looked at me, not past me, not through me. And that makes it enough. Wind needled his collar. I unwound my Marine scarf and set it across his shoulders. It brightened him like a ribbon on gray weather. "You keep it," I said. "I'll be indoors soon." "Kindness tells me more about rank than medals ever will," he murmured. I checked my watch, 12 minutes late. Not disastrous. Enough. I thanked him for sharing a bench and hurried on, boots striking concrete cadence in my head, left, right, left. Marines keep moving. Hartley's gate was wrought iron, inside marble chrome carpet that swallowed footsteps. The receptionist measured me in a glance, the no-name blouse, the coat without a scarf, and let half a smile slip. "Name?" "Alyssa Reed, 5 o'clock. "You're late." "Yes, ma'am." A young vet in a fitted suit smirked. The lobby TV looped soft focus footage of folded flags under the company logo. The volume stayed low like an apology. An hour crawled. Finally, a door opened and a gaunt manager beckoned. "Reed." He said it like a tracking number. He skimmed my record, called my experience logistics adjacent, my knee a durability concern. He asked if I managed emotions well, then repeated the question louder as if volume could bully truth. When we finished, he didn't shake my hand. "We'll be in touch," which is American for goodbye. Outside twilight. I touched the space where my scarf should have been and felt only air. The bench on the green sat empty, crumbs among leaves. For a minute I wondered if I'd been foolish, $12 and a scarf I loved given away. An interview late and likely lost. Then my drill instructor's gravelly gospel rose in my head: do the right thing, and let tomorrow argue with itself. Back at the trailer, I fried 2 eggs and lit the candle I save for hard days. My knee ached, honest. The dog-eared notebook looked tired of being hopeful. I told myself I'd get up, check the job boards at the library, and try again. The phone rang at 9. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then thumbed it on. Ms. Reed. A calm voice, crisp as starched linen. This is Hartley Defense Systems. The chairman would like to see you personally. Can you be here tomorrow at 4? The skillet handle chimed when I set it down too hard. Yes, sir, I said, because the core never leaves your tongue. He gave directions to the executive entrance and hung up. I stood in the thin quiet and thought of the man on the bench touching the edge of my scarf. Sleep came spare and practical. I woke before dawn, dressed slow, careful, like the day might break if I rushed. The train carried me back through towns that still salute the flag at ball games. I stepped off, lifted my chin to the cold, and climbed the hill toward glass and marble and a room I could not yet imagine. You know the doorway I reached, mahogany table, chandelier, breathing a stranger, smiling like a friend, my scarf telling the truth. That's where part 2 will begin. But the choice that made it possible happened here in the cold, with a sandwich and a strip of wool and a simple nod between two people nobody else saw. The next morning broke clean and cold, the kind of cold that wakes every old ache in a veteran's bones. I was up before the sun boots lined up by the door, nerves humming like radio static. The call from Hartley Defense Systems still didn't feel real. They wanted me, the same woman their recruiter had dismissed 2 days ago. I boiled coffee thick enough to chew, packed my old service folder, and checked the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the spit-polished sergeant in dress blues, just a tired civilian in a thrift store jacket, hair pulled neat, eyes steady. Still, the Marine in me squared her shoulders. Marines show up. Always. The train rattled through farmland glazed in frost. Out the window, barns leaned like old men remembering better days. At the station, a driver in a dark coat held a small sign, Sergeant A. Reed. That alone felt unreal. The last time I'd seen my name printed clean and official was on a deployment manifest. He didn't speak as we climbed the hill. Hartley Tower loomed ahead, steel glass and money. The flag out front snapped in the wind, spotless. Inside, the same receptionist from before stood straighter when she saw the driver escort me. Her tone had lost its acid. Good afternoon, Ms. Reed. The chairman is expecting you. I followed a quiet hallway that smelled faintly of lemon polish and power. The elevator doors closed with a hush, rising past mirrored floors. At the top, a single corridor stretched toward a set of heavy oak doors. My pulse kept rhythm with the elevator's hum. When those doors opened, I braced for a boardroom full of strangers. Instead, one man sat behind a wide desk, sunlight pouring over him. Clean-shaven, now suit-pressed eyes, the same clear blue I remembered from the park. My scarf, my Marine scarf, lay draped over the chair behind him like a banner. Good afternoon, Sergeant Reed, he said, voice deep but gentle. Please sit. I couldn't move for a second. Sir, we met, I managed. He smiled. Yes. You gave me your lunch and your warmth. I thought it only fair to return both. I sat because my knees didn't trust standing. He introduced himself as Jonathan Hartley, founder and chairman, son of a Korean War vet, widowed nearing 70. He told me he occasionally left the tower in plain clothes to see how people treat those who have nothing to give back. The results, he said, are often disappointing. My mind flashed to Calvin Brooks, the recruiter who'd mocked my limp. Hartley steepled his fingers. I watched the security footage from that day. Your interview was enlightening. You were professional, respectful. He was not. I started to speak, but he raised a hand. You don't owe me excuses. You've served enough years explaining yourself to men who haven't earned the right to judge you. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Send Mr. Brooks in. The door opened a minute later. Brooks froze when he saw me sitting across from the chairman. His smirk curdled. Mr. Brooks, Hartley said evenly, this is Sergeant Alyssa Reed, the candidate you dismissed. You called her, I believe, burnt out. Brooks stammered, Sir, I didn't realize. No, you didn't, Hartley said. That's precisely the point. He turned to me. Sergeant, I'd like you to tell Mr. Brooks what you told me on that park bench. I blinked. Sir, I only said it's a cold evening. Hartley's mouth softened. And that Mr. Brooks is what decency sounds like, unrehearsed, unprofitable, and rare. The recruiter muttered something about misunderstanding and fled under Hartley's dismissive nod. When the door shut, Hartley leaned back. You're wondering why I've called you here. My company runs a veterans transition program. We hire a few dozen each year to help them find footing again. I'm expanding it, and I want you to lead it. Lead, the word felt too large in my mouth. You've led before, he said simply. I read your service record, Kandahar Logistics, under fire commendations for leadership. You understand what it means to rebuild. That's what we need here. I stared at the scarf on his chair. Sir, I came in late out of uniform broke. And kind, he interrupted. The rest can be fixed with time. Kindness can't be taught. He opened a folder and slid it toward me, an offer letter, a salary that made my throat tighten, and a start date Monday. I don't know what to say, I whispered. He smiled again, faint lines deepening around eyes that had seen their share of wars. Say you'll show up. Marines do that better than anyone. We shook hands, firm, human, equal. His grip was warm, and when I stood to leave, he picked up the scarf and held it out. Keep it. It suits you better than me. But remember, this company isn't charity. It's another battlefield. Lead with honor, not ego. Outside the office, the air smelled different, brighter somehow. The receptionist smiled for real this time. Downstairs, my reflection in the elevator mirror looked older, maybe wiser. On the train home, the scarf lay folded on my lap. The sky over the fields turned gold, and I thought about the old lesson they drilled into us at Paris Island. The real test comes when no one's watching. That night I wrote in my notebook not about survival, but about purpose. Tomorrow I'd buy groceries without counting change. I'd call my mother, and I'd make sure every vet who walked into Hartley Defense felt seen. I didn't know yet that the hardest part wasn't getting the job. It was learning what to do with the power to change things, and how revenge handled right could look an awful lot like justice. When I walked back through those glass doors the following Monday, I felt like a ghost visiting a life that used to belong to someone else. The reception desk, the marble floors, even the air conditioning hum, it all looked the same. Only I had changed. A week ago, I'd been counting coins for coffee. Now the same people who once ignored me stood a little straighter when I passed. It's strange how respect shows up only after someone else vouches for you. Mr. Hartley's assistant, a young woman with the alertness of someone who'd worked under him for years, led me to a modest office with a desk, a computer, and a view of the factory floor. He said you'd want to see how things really work, she explained. Below, engineers in safety vests moved between machine sparks flying in blue arcs. The sight steadied me. It looked like duty, like motion with purpose. That morning, Hartley introduced me to the staff as the new director of veteran integration. Some clapped politely, others whispered. He ignored both reactions. Sergeant Reed here will ensure this company honors the people who made its success possible, he said. Then turning to me, show them how Marines lead. I nodded, heart thudding, yes, sir. Afterward, I met my small team, 3 veterans, 2 civilians. One was Tom Delgado, Army mechanic, sharp-tongued and loyal. Another Sophie Tran, Navy medic with eyes that missed nothing. They looked at me cautiously. I looked back with the same. Trust doesn't come issued like gear. You earn it one day at a time. The first week was pure firefight. Files stacked requests from vets waiting months for callbacks funding questions no one had answered. The previous director had treated the program like a publicity photo. I decided to turn it into a mission. Start simple, I told the team. Find every veteran we've hired and ask one question. What do you need to succeed here? By day's end, we had a pattern: lost paperwork, missed pay raises, supervisors who didn't understand service culture. I wrote a report that night, careful, factual, but honest. When I dropped it on Hartley's desk, he skimmed the pages, then said quietly, "That's what I hired you for." He looked older that evening, shoulders heavy. You know, Sergeant, when I came home from Vietnam, nobody said thank you. They said, "Why'd you go?" I promised myself if I ever built something worth a damn, I'd make room for people like you. I hesitated. You don't owe us that, sir. He smiled faintly. I do. We all do. It would have been easy to stay content, steady paycheck, real respect, but Marines aren't wired for comfort. So I pushed harder. We set up mentorships, counseling, job matching workshops. We turned a forgotten floor into a training center. And the more we succeeded, the more resistance surfaced. The old guard executives like Calvin Brooks resented every change. To them, we were idealists spending their budget on sentiment. One morning, Brooks cornered me in the hallway. "You're making us look soft," he said. "This company's about efficiency, not handouts." I met his eyes. Helping veterans succeed isn't softness, it's strategy. Loyalty pays dividends you can't calculate on a spreadsheet. He sneered. "You think Hartley's going to protect you forever? He's old. When he steps down, reality will bite." Maybe he meant it as a threat. To me, it sounded like a reminder nothing lasts forever. That week, Hartley called me to his office again. "They'll fight you," he warned. "They'll call it charity, inefficiency, sentimentality. Let them. You've seen worse." I grinned. "Yes, sir. I've had sand in my boots and mortars in my ears. Office politics don't scare me." He laughed, then coughed the sound deep and rough. "Good answer. Keep that fire." By month's end, our small victories added up. Retention improved morale. Rose local papers started asking questions. One headline read, "Marine Veteran Rebuilds Lives at Hartley Defense." It embarrassed me, but Hartley framed it in the lobby anyway. One evening as I packed up, I saw him standing by the window, the sunset drawing lines across his face. My scarf was around his shoulders again. "You ever wonder," he asked, "why people only notice goodness when it's dramatic?" I shrugged. Maybe quiet decency doesn't trend. He smiled. "Then let's make it trend here." Over the next months, he mentored me with the precision of a commanding officer. He taught me how to read balance sheets, negotiate contracts, disarm egos. Leadership, he said, isn't barking orders. It's convincing people the order was their idea. But beneath his calm, I sensed something changing, tiredness he couldn't hide. Once I found medication bottles on his desk. When I asked, he waved it off. "Old engines misfire, that's all." It wasn't. I knew that look, men trying to stay strong long after their bodies issued new orders. By early spring, the boardroom whispers grew louder. Rumors said Hartley was grooming me to take over the entire foundation arm of the company. Brooks and his allies didn't like that. I'd become their living reminder that humanity had consequences. The confrontation came on a Thursday. I walked into a meeting to find Brooks presenting a cost review that gutted our program's budget. Hartley listened without expression until Brooks finished, then turned to me. "Sergeant, read your rebuttal." I stood heart steady. "Sir, cutting this program saves less than 1% of annual revenue. The goodwill, loyalty, and skill retention it generates are worth far more. If we abandon these veterans, we abandon the values your company claims to stand for." Brooks rolled his eyes. "You're sentimental." Hartley's reply was soft but lethal. "And you, Mr. Brooks, are dismissed." Gasps filled the room. He looked at me, then weary but proud. "You keep fighting like that, Sergeant. The world needs reminders that compassion isn't weakness." I wanted to argue to say he needed rest, but his eyes told me he already knew time was short. When the meeting ended, he pressed a small card into my hand. "If I'm ever not around," he said, "call this number. The foundation will need you." I didn't know that number would soon change my life again, nor that my quiet revenge against the doubters was only beginning. 2 weeks later, I learned that even victories come with silence attached. Mr. Hartley stopped coming into the office. His assistant said he was working remotely, but the lie hung in the air like cold smoke. I sent an email checking in, no reply. Then another. Nothing. When you've served long enough, you recognize the sound of things ending. It's quiet like a tent zipper closing for the last time. Then, one Tuesday morning, the intercom buzzed. "Sergeant Reed, please come to the 18th floor." That was the executive suite, the floor where decisions got made and people got forgotten. I rode up with a knot in my chest. The doors opened to a view of the city, gray, proud, distant. Waiting by the conference room was a lawyer in a suit so sharp it could cut glass. "Ms. Reed," he said with a rehearsed smile, "Mr. Hartley has taken medical leave. I represent the board during his absence." My pulse skipped. "Is he all right?" "Stable," he said, which is corporate code for not your concern. He asked that you continue your work. In the meantime, we'll be reviewing all programs for cost efficiency. That word again, efficiency. The same knife Brooks had used. They started trimming immediately. Supplies delayed, training, postponed, pay raises frozen. My team watched our progress unravel piece by piece. Tom slammed his coffee mug down one morning. "They're trying to bury us." "Then we dig back up," I said. But truth is, it hurt. Every veteran who walked through our doors reminded me of myself before the scarf before Hartley. Men with steady eyes and broken backs, women who still folded their laundry like inspection day. They deserved more than corporate thrift. I called Hartley's number. His aide answered in a whisper. "He's in hospice, Sergeant. He doesn't want visitors." Hospice. The word hit like a mortar I didn't see coming. I drove home through sleet hands, white on the wheel. In the glove compartment, the scarf waited soft red patient. That night, I sat at my kitchen table drafting a letter. Not to the board, not to HR, to him. I thanked him for believing in decency when no one else did. I told him we'd keep the mission alive. I didn't expect an answer. The next morning, the receptionist handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written in strong, deliberate pen strokes. Inside, Sergeant Reed, if you're reading this, I've taken my last leave. You once said that Marines keep moving. I believe you. The world needs you to. When I first met you, I saw exhaustion in your eyes, but also fire. Don't let them extinguish it. You'll be contacted soon. Trust that. J.H. I folded the letter carefully, the paper trembling in my hands. Days passed. Then a call came from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Reed, this is Lawson and Myers attorneys for Mr. Hartley's estate. The chairman requested your presence tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the reading of his directive. Directive. That sounded more like a mission than a will. At the office, the atmosphere felt wrong, too polite, too still. The board members sat around the long table, all crisp collars and folded hands. At the head sat Mr. Lawson, the lawyer. He cleared his throat. Per Mr. Hartley's instructions, his final directive involves leadership of the Veterans Reentry Initiative. Whispers fluttered like paper. Lawson continued. Effective immediately, Sergeant Alyssa Reed is appointed Executive Director of the initiative with full operational authority. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the chairman of finance scoffed. That's absurd. She's a mid-level hire. Lawson adjusted his glasses. His words were explicit. She leads. Or you explain to the press why you ignored a dying veteran's last wish. The room froze. Power, I realized, is quieter than shouting. It's simply knowing the next move before they do. After the meeting, I stepped into Hartley's office. The scarf was folded neatly on his chair, a single note resting on top. Keep building. Do not compromise compassion for convenience. You're in command now. I pressed the wool to my chest and let the tears come, no bugles, no medals, just gratitude and grief woven together. From that day forward, things changed. I had authority, but also a target on my back. The same executives who used to laugh now smiled too much. Of course, Director Reed, they'd say their teeth bright as knives. We worked harder. Sophie built a database to track every veteran's progress. Tom ran weekend workshops. I handled press interviews, something I never thought I'd do. We made the initiative visible, undeniable. 3 months in, we held our first major ceremony, 30 veterans graduating into full-time positions. The mayor came cameras, too. When I spoke, I quoted, "Hartley kindness tells me more about rank than medals ever could." Applause filled the hall. For a moment I felt him there, old proud somewhere above the noise. Afterward, as people mingled, a man in an expensive gray suit approached. "You're doing impressive work," he said, offering his card. "I represent the Hartley board now. Some members have concerns about your approach." "Concerns?" "Your emphasis on emotional leadership. It's not scalable." I smiled. Neither is integrity. He chuckled politely, but his eyes were sharp. "Enjoy your moment, Sergeant. The world moves fast." He turned away before I could answer. That night, I sat in my small office light's low scarf draped over the chair. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just existing well enough to haunt the people who doubted you. Still, fatigue crept in. Leadership is lonely terrain. I missed Hartley's gravel humor, his way of turning hard truths into orders that sounded like encouragement. I promised myself I'd keep his vision alive, but promises have a cost. And soon the same board that once ignored me would try to claim his legacy for themselves and strip the soul from everything we built. But they didn't know Marines. We fight best when cornered. By summer, the air in the building felt different, thick, rehearsed, too quiet when I walked by. You could tell when people had meetings about you, but not with you. The veterans on my team felt it too. Tom caught up to me one morning in the break room. "They're circling boss," he muttered, stirring black coffee. "Brooks's buddies. They want your program gone. Say it's too emotional for a defense company." I smiled because Marines don't flinch for the enemy. Then we'll give them logic numbers and results they can't bury. We worked through July heat sweat on our backs and purpose in our bones. We published success reports, 93% retention, 0 attrition, dozens of veterans promoted within 6 months. We sent the data to the board and the press. I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. They invited me to a review session on a Friday afternoon, the kind that sounds friendly and smells like ambush. When I entered the boardroom, the view behind the glass was so bright I could see my reflection on the table, a woman still standing straight still, Marine enough to salute the truth. The interim chairman, Mr. Harlan, adjusted his gold cufflinks. "Director Reed, we've reviewed your expenditures. Your program has exceeded its budget by 15%. "Because we added mental health counseling and emergency grants," I said. "It saved lives." Harlan smiled thinly. "We're not in the saving lives business, Ms. Reed. We're in defense manufacturing. Profit, not pity." Something old and cold rose in my chest, the same anger I'd swallowed when people stared through me at the VA line. "You're also in the Hartley business," I said. "He built this company on duty, not dividends." Murmurs spread. Harlan leaned forward. "Let's not romanticize him. He was a fine man, but his era's over. The board has decided to dissolve the Veterans Reentry Initiative and reallocate funding." I looked around the table. Some faces turned away. Others watched, waiting for me to beg. Instead, I nodded once. "Understood," I said evenly. "You'll get my formal response in writing." "Good. Keep it brief," Harlan said. I walked out without another word, my heels clicking like punctuation marks on marble. Back in my office, Tom and Sophie were waiting. "They killed it, didn't they?" Sophie asked. "Not yet," I said. "We still have the press, the numbers, and a promise." That night, I pulled Hartley's old letters from my drawer, the ones he'd written about the Foundation's charter. He had left one clause untouched, a legal provision tucked like a landmine in plain sight. Any philanthropic program demonstrating measurable veteran benefit cannot be terminated without public notice and approval from the acting director. I was the acting director. They couldn't dissolve it quietly. The next morning, I called a journalist from the Pittsburgh Chronicle who'd once interviewed us. "If I give you a story," I said, "will you print it if it's true?" "Depends how true," she said. "Documented true," I replied. By Monday, the headline blazed online, "Defense Giant Moves to Shut Down Veteran Jobs Program Despite Record Success." The phones in the executive wing rang non-stop. Harlan summoned me to his office, red-faced and trembling. "Did you leak this?" "I released a public notice as required by company policy," I said calmly. "It's in the charter. Maybe you should read it." He glared. "You're finished here." "Maybe," I said, "but you'll have to finish me in front of the veterans, the press, and every taxpayer who buys your stock." He didn't answer. He just stared, the kind of stare that's half rage, half fear of exposure. Later that evening, an email arrived from the same law firm that had handled Hartley's estate. "To Director Reed, subject emergency board meeting. Ms. Reed, per Mr. Hartley's directive. Any significant change to the Veterans Initiative must be reviewed by the Oversight Foundation established under his personal trust. The trustees will convene tomorrow morning. Attendance mandatory." The message ended with 3 signatures, one I recognized. When I entered the conference room the next morning, a hush fell. The trustees sat at the far end of the long table. In the center chair was a woman, gray hair, tied back, sharp eyes, a warmth that carried authority. "I'm Eleanor Hartley," she said, "Jonathan's sister." Every executive in the room stiffened. She gestured for me to sit beside her. "My brother told me you'd keep his promise. Let's make sure his company remembers it." What followed wasn't shouting. It was surgical. She cited the trust clauses, the PR fallout, the moral precedent. I added numbers, testimonies, data from our graduates. Harlan tried to interrupt twice. She silenced him with a look honed from decades of boardrooms. When the meeting ended, the trustees voted unanimously. The Veterans Initiative would not only continue but expand under the direct authority of the Foundation, permanently insulated from corporate cuts. The room emptied like a battlefield after surrender. Harlan walked past me, face the color of paper. "Enjoy your victory," he muttered. "You'll find it lonely at the top." I looked out the window where sunlight spilled over the city. I've stood alone before, I said. It's where Marines are trained to start. That night we held an impromptu celebration at the factory cafeteria. The veterans clapped, someone played an old country tune, and for the first time in years I laughed without reserve. Still, part of me stayed quiet, thinking of the man on the park bench. I owed him this: every headline, every saved job, every small redemption. Later, as I walked to my truck, Sophie caught up. "Boss," she said softly, "what now?" I looked at her, the night air crisp, the scarf snug around my shoulders. "Now we rebuild bigger, and we teach them what strength really means." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finishing what he started, turning compassion into policy, kindness into armor. Because Hartley had been right, the real battlefield wasn't overseas. It was right here between greed and grace, and I planned to keep fighting until one side surrendered. The fall came early that year, gold leaves piling against the fences, a chill in the morning air that carried the faint smell of wood smoke. At Hartley Defense, the mood had shifted. For the first time, the veterans program wasn't just tolerated, it was respected. The trustees' decision had been front-page news. Reporters called schools, invited us to speak, and donations poured in from small towns across the country, letters with checks signed in shaky cursive from one vet to another. Keep it going. But success never walks alone. It drags jealousy in its shadow. The same executives who once mocked me now smiled too easily. They congratulated me in hallways but stopped talking when I turned the corner. I could feel the resentment simmering just beneath the corporate smiles. We had grown fast, too fast for comfort. Dozens of veterans from around the state had joined the new training cohorts. Tom managed the workshops. Sophie oversaw mentorships. Every week we celebrated someone getting hired, someone buying a home again, someone who stopped sleeping in their car. We were saving lives one paycheck at a time. And yet part of me still felt that emptiness, the kind that comes when the mission that defined you is suddenly quiet. I missed Hartley's voice, that steady gravel that could turn doubt into orders. Some nights I'd stay late rereading his old letters just to remind myself of his belief in me. One night, well after dark, I was the last one in the office. The scarf, his scarf, now mine again, was draped over my chair. I'd just finished reviewing next quarter's projections when the elevator dinged. I expected the security guard. Instead, the doors opened to reveal Eleanor Hartley. She smiled the kind of smile that belonged to people who carried grief with grace. "Thought I'd find you here," she said. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were in town." "I came to deliver something my brother left in his personal files." She handed me a worn leather folder embossed with his initials. "He wanted you to have this when the program became self-sustaining." Inside was a single page typed, dated 3 years ago. Directive. If this foundation thrives, grant Sergeant Reed authority to form an independent Veterans Academy. Fund it indefinitely. Beneath the signature, a handwritten line, "Let her teach the world that compassion is strategy." I swallowed hard. He planned all this. She nodded. Jonathan had a habit of preparing for goodness like other men prepare for war. We talked for an hour about his service, his regrets, his conviction that America was strongest when it remembered its veterans. Before she left, she said, "He saw himself in you, Alyssa. Tired, but unbroken." After she was gone, I sat alone for a long time, staring at the city lights and thinking how strange it was how the smallest act of kindness, a sandwich and a scarf, could lead here. But the story wasn't finished. A week later, I got an email marked urgent. The subject line read, "Audit inquiry, possible misconduct." It accused my team of misusing funds. False, of course, but in business perception kills faster than proof. I stormed into Harlan's office. He was the only one with motive. "You're behind this," I said. He leaned back, smug. "Prove it." "I will," I said, "and when I do, I won't fire you. I'll invite you to the next graduation and make you shake every veteran's hand." His smirk faltered just slightly. "You don't scare me, Sergeant." "I'm not here to scare you," I said. "I'm here to outlast you." It took a week-long hours and Sophie's sharp instincts to trace the doctored numbers back to his assistant. When we presented the evidence to the trustees, they removed Harlan unanimously. No shouting, no threats, just quiet justice, the kind that sticks. Afterward, Tom found me on the balcony outside. "We got him," he said, handing me a cup of diner coffee. "Feels good, huh?" Not revenge, I said, watching the sunset burn orange across the skyline. Just balance. Hartley used to say mercy and accountability share the same spine. That night, I went home to my small rented house on the edge of town. The neighborhood was ordinary kids' bikes on lawns, porch lights flicking on one by one. I liked it that way. It reminded me what we were fighting for. I lit the single candle I always used on tough nights and placed the scarf across the table. The red caught the glow, the threads warm and worn from years of use. In my notebook, I wrote 3 words under the day's date: honor, service, continuity. The next morning, I met the Board of Trustees to discuss Hartley's final directive, the Veterans Academy. We'd call it the Hartley Center for Service and Transition. It would be built on donated land outside Pittsburgh, a campus with classrooms, counseling offices, and housing for vets who needed a place to start over. When I presented the blueprint, Eleanor smiled through tears. "He'd be proud," she said. "You've turned his belief into infrastructure." Construction began in winter. Local volunteers showed up with tool belts and shovels. Veterans worked beside civilians. On the first day, I walked the muddy field where the foundation would stand and whispered to the cold air, "We're still moving, sir." By spring, the walls were rising. The main hall would bear a plaque reading, "In honor of those who gave more than we ever saw." On the far end, we planned a small memorial garden, nothing grand, just a bench under an oak tree. And that's where I planned to leave the scarf when the time came, not as surrender, but as a sign that his mission had found a new keeper. When the dedication day finally arrived, the mayor spoke, reporters crowded, and a band played the Marine Corps hymn. I stepped to the microphone, wind tugging my hair. I was a tired, jobless veteran once I began, voice steady. I thought I had nothing left to give. Then a stranger reminded me that decency is never wasted. Everything you see here began with a sandwich, a scarf, and a moment of kindness when no one was watching. People clapped softly, some crying. Among them I saw young veterans standing tall again, children waving flags, even a few executives from the company bowing their heads. Afterward, I walked alone to the garden bench and laid the scarf across it. "You can rest now, Mr. Hartley," I whispered. "Mission accomplished." But in truth, it wasn't over, not yet. The story had started with hunger, fatigue, and doubt. It needed to end with purpose and a message for everyone listening. Because kindness isn't just about what you give, it's about who you become when you give it. The following spring, the Hartley Center opened its doors to its first full class of veterans. The building smelled of new paint and coffee. The hallways echoed with voices that still carried the rhythm of marching cadence. We had classrooms, computer labs, a counseling wing, even a small flag garden outside where sunlight filtered through the oak leaves. Every morning I walked those halls early before the noise began and ran my hand along the wall where the words were engraved in steel, "Honor isn't a medal. It's what you do when no one's watching." That line, Hartley's line, was the heartbeat of everything we built. Our program didn't make headlines anymore. It didn't need to. Quiet success rippled outward. Veterans who once slept in shelters now wore hard hats, opened businesses, mentored others. The center became its own family, no uniforms, no ranks, just people trying to start again. One morning as I prepared to teach a leadership seminar, a young Marine named Cole stopped me in the hallway. Early 30s, still carried the edge of the battlefield in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, "I almost didn't come. Thought I was done with people." "What changed your mind?" I asked. He hesitated. "Saw the article about you and Mr. Hartley. Figured if he could see something worth saving, maybe there's hope for the rest of us." I smiled. "Hope's part of the uniform here. You'll get used to it." He laughed, the sound brittle but real. Later that day, while reviewing paperwork, I found an envelope in my inbox. No name, just handwriting. I recognized instantly, Eleanor Hartley. Inside was a single photo, Mr. Hartley at the dedication ceremony I hadn't known she'd attended, standing near the back, scarf draped across his shoulders, eyes warm and alive. He'd been there all along, quietly watching. Beneath the photo, a note, "He believed you would finish the mission. You have." I don't cry easily, but that day I let a few fall, not for sadness but for completion. Weeks passed. The center ran smoothly. I gave lectures at local colleges, spoke at veterans' breakfasts, visited families of graduates. People asked if I ever planned to expand nationwide. Maybe I told them. But not yet. One heart at a time, I said. That's how you rebuild a nation. In late May, the board invited me to speak at the annual corporate dinner Hartley Defense's first since Jonathan's passing. The same ballroom where I'd once felt invisible now glittered with chandeliers and polished silver. Executives mingled, reporters hovered, and a banner hung across the stage, building the future, honoring the past. When they called my name, the room quieted. I stepped to the podium, my old Marine scarf folded neatly over one arm. I came here years ago. I began as a veteran with no direction and no job. I was hungry, exhausted, and convinced the world had moved on without me. A stranger offered me a chance to see differently. He believed character mattered more than credentials. I told them the story, the diner, the sandwich, the scarf. I watched faces soften, some bowing heads, others blinking back tears. I've learned that honor isn't forged in battle, I said. It's proven in what we do for each other afterward. Every veteran we help find a home, every life we restore adds another stripe to the flag we all share. When I finished, the applause rose slow and steady like a tide. A few people stood. I didn't see Harlan. He'd resigned quietly months earlier, but I imagined him somewhere reading the headlines again, and realizing this was what endurance looked like. After the dinner, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered against the river. A reporter followed me out, microphone in hand. "Sergeant Reed," she said softly, "what would you say to Americans who feel the world's too divided, too cold for small acts to matter anymore?" I looked out over the water. I'd tell them to start anyway. Someone's watching, even if you can't see who yet, and one day that someone might change everything. She lowered the microphone. "That's beautiful." "It's true," I said. A week later, back at the center, Cole approached me after class. "Ma'am," he said, holding out a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photo of the Hartley Center's first graduating class, me standing beside the veterans. The headline, simple, "The Marine Who Fed a Stranger and Rebuilt an Army of Hope." "They're calling you a hero," he said. I shook my head. Heroes are the ones who keep showing up. I just reminded people how. He smiled and saluted, informal but sincere. "Semper Fi, ma'am." "Semper Fi, Cole." That evening I sat alone in the garden behind the center. The bench under the oak tree still held the faint imprint of the scarf I'd left there months earlier. The wind carried the smell of cut grass and distant rain. I thought about everything that had led here, the humiliation, the hunger, the act of giving when I had nothing left to give. And I realized something simple but profound. Revenge hadn't been the point. Renewal had. Somewhere beyond the clouds, I hoped Hartley knew. I closed my eyes and spoke to the quiet the way soldiers talk to ghosts. "We did it, sir. Mission complete." The wind stirred the leaves, soft and approving. Before leaving, I turned once more toward the bench. "If anyone finds this story," I whispered, "pass it on. Someone out there needs to hear that kindness still wins." If you've listened this far, thank you for believing in stories where goodness still has a fighting chance. If this one touched you, share it with someone who's forgotten what decency feels like. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, because here on Honorline we tell stories that remind the world honor, mercy, and courage never go out of style.